The United Kingdom versus the United States, comparing terrorism, mass shootings, gun violence, violence in general, and priorities in politicians. You shouldn't put those together. The United Kingdom had 4,972 terrorist incidents in a 45-year period of time from 1970 to 2015. This resulted in 3,395 dead, and it works out to 110 attacks a year and 75 killed per year. Now, that's not obviously all the details. Who did it? Why? The earliest ones were mostly considered what Americans would call domestic terrorism. They were based on the Troubles and that sort of thing. And the individuals perpetrating these acts treated it as a war. The worst case scenario that they felt would be applied to them would be war crime or just simply acts of war. Later on, it was mostly external sources who treated it again as an act of war, or at worst, a war crime, attacking civilians or civilian targets, and the early group could be claimed to be attacking civilian militarized police, that sort of thing, because you'd have to look into this more to find out all the details. But again, that works out to 110 attacks a year and 75 killed. Now, I'm not talking about mass shootings versus general murder levels in the UK. I've already done a video about that. And there's some undeniable lack of comparison here. But we're only going to do what are called by their own government and every other government terrorist acts, as defined as terrorism internationally and also accepted within the country when discussing these, and within our country. The United States had less than half, or a little over half, the number of incidents from 1970 to 2013, a 43-year period of time. So it would work out to, let's just call it, a little worse than half as many. We have a larger population. Obviously, this is going to have a different per capita rating, but let's just use these numbers anyway. So 2,600 terrorist incidents in 43 years, with 3,500 killed. Very similar number over a similar time period. But in the United States, this is a little bit weird because one of the incidents on one day, September 11th, caused 85% of the deaths, or 2,977, and as of injuries, which are not normally listed as terrorist numbers because we just don't do them, about that number or more, double, or depending on how you do the numbers, a lot more people were injured than killed because it was, in effect, an attack by impacting airplanes into buildings. One of the reasons this is not something that people can discuss in the United States with any kind of objectivity is because in a single day, 85% of the deaths over a 43-year period of time happened in one damn day. And specifically over a period of few hours. This is something very, very an outlier. Over half of the total of 2,600 incidents happened in the 1970s. And that would work out to 1,430 of them, which is when we would call it mostly domestic terrorists, and not external terrorism. So we have one day, where it was primarily not from within but from without, an external terrorist source that declared this an act of war in their own minds, as their mode for war is to do terrorism, and to literally attack a non-military target by definition, and then attack the Pentagon, and attack with another plane, presumptively somewhere in Washington, D.C., possibly the Capitol, who knows. So they were dividing up their attacking forces between civilian on-purpose attack, which is the majority of this, and an actual military target, the Pentagon, and possibly the White House or whatever. So let's continue. But as I said, over half of the actual terrorist incidents happened in the 1970s, and many of them were by terrorists that would be identified easily as leftist. And a large number, depending on how you look up the numbers, they're external versus internal, or domestic versus, imported. These leftist attacks, when looked up, at best, are around 100 incidents, killing people in a 116-year period of time. Fewer than one person a year is actually killed by leftists, and that's being generous to their ability to cause incidents. They did cause over 50% of the attacks from 1970 to 1980. That's the number of them. That's the majority of the attacks for the entire 43-year period of time we're looking at. But what that means is that they were supremely unsuccessful attacks on people, or just simply trying to attack symbols and buildings, and the deaths were incidental and not the primary purpose. So again, if you're talking about leftists, terrorists, obsessively, because they're over half of the attacks over a 43-year period of time in the United States, that's technically true. But refusing to acknowledge they have almost no effect on lifespans and are not a significant source of death. And buffoonery maximized. A large number, not majority, but a large number of them were arrested, served time, and were released and have served their sentences. Okay? And this, the animal rights activists that decided to kill people and that sort of crap, or threatened to. Okay, and I'm just doing the left-wingers here. So when you see right-wingers complaining about how the majority of terrorist attacks are by left-wingers, they're talking about shit that stopped happening a little bit, during the 80s. It stopped, and it mostly occurred in the 1970s. And they'll never forgive the left for having terrorism that doesn't exist with the majority of time anymore. And for them, the specter of this is the thing they want to keep going, rather than talking about they killed a total of one person a year, maybe, like 9 per decade, in a 116-year period of time. Now let's talk about a similar period of time-ish. In a 16-year period of time, from 2001 to 2017, 85 violent extremist occurrences in the United States, with 234 people killed. 73% of those were by right-wingers, and they killed about 100 people or so in a 16-year period of time. That's a lot higher death rate, or success rate if you're a terrorist, right? And they caused 62 incidents in a 16-year period of time. Okay? And again, yes, over half of the incidents were caused by left-wingers. But the only way I could get enough of them to account to 100 people hurt was to use 116 years. Okay, we have 100 people killed in 16 years by right-wingers. Not 100 people in 116 years like you do with left-wingers. And then contrasting that, about 100 people killed by Islamic fundamentalists who are slightly more efficient at murder because they had fewer killings. They caused 27% of the incidents in that same 16-year period of time. So right-wingers bitching that Islamic fundamentalists and left-wingers, Democrats, are the biggest terrorist sources, using data that's outmoded with a death rate that's very low from left-wingers, and refusing to acknowledge 73% of the most recent terrorist attacks were done by right-wingers that had an actual death rate that was notable. If you see conservatives complaining about left-wingers being the majority of terrorist attacks, ask them for a time frame. If they won't talk about it, you say, yeah, you're talking about the 70s, and then bring up, over a 16-year period of time, your side murdered more people by literally 10 to 1 here or something. And your side is responsible for almost a little over 70% of the attacks in the United States, not the Islamic fundamentalists. Right-wingers are bad about that. And a tiny portion of it's like 1% or something like that is left-wingers. Our current year, the problem we are dealing with, isn't represented here, but it's a much more representative sample of what's going on now. So again, emphasis added. over a long enough period of time, 100 fucking years plus 16, yes, you can find leftists causing 55% of the terrorist incidents or more. Then you go for the next 100 years backwards, and it was exclusively right-wingers and mostly massacres, authorized by the government in most cases, of people who were not white, murdering ex-slaves, the South murdering captured northern black army people, murdering Native Americans. Just mass genocide. Covered by the U.S. government. Acceptable. So we're all in this bucket together, and we need to start acting like it, number one. Number two, deliberately blaming a group of people that so bumblefuck they can't even kill one person a year efficiently enough, or complaining about Islamic fundamentalists when the biggest threat currently is right-wingers. A little bit of a fuck up. And yeah, comparing the United Kingdom to the United States is not fair, but it was similar number of people killed, and they have more incidents per year, which means they're slightly less efficient at killing too. Again, the majority of early terrorists were not trying to kill people necessarily. They were trying to kill what they said was an opponent, a fighting force, as police, when they really were police. But, you know, each side, when they do something terrible, tries to justify it. I find it really weird that right-wing extremists try to justify what they're doing by complaining about people who were caught, imprisoned, punished, and released after serving, in most cases, full sentences. Meanwhile, we don't even arrest the fuckers who attacked our own goddamn country and then deal with them as they are, traitors, and just shoot them. Yes, if you attack the Capitol, you're a traitor. You deserve death. I agree with this. But yeah, it keeps squealing about over half of the population, over half of the incidents that are terrorist incidents were by left-wingers, and just leave out the rest of it. Someone left this kind of comment about a month ago, and I finally looked it up, because honestly, I felt like looking it up. Actually, no, I happened upon it by accident. I was curious how many terrorist incidents. And remember, again, emphasis added, the majority of deaths by gunfire in the United States are suicides. 60% or more. The rest of them, the majority of them, are pistol. Again, these are mostly pistol shots, by the way, because it's easier to shoot yourself with a pistol. And then the minority of all the deaths in the United States are murder incidents, and the majority of them, again, is pistols. And regulating rifles in response to it is that you're going after what you can go after instead of what's causing the problem. Triage. Look for what's causing the problem. Look for what you can solve versus what's causing the majority of the problem. That's actually kind of how this works. We're triaging things, but we're not explaining what our triage criteria is. I've just explained it, apparently. Right-wingers talking about left-wing violence being a majority of the terrorist incidents is technically true, and the best kind of trutherism in the world. But it ignores the fact that there are over 70% of the actual terrorist attacks in the last 16 years have been done by right-wingers, not Islamic fundamentalists, and absolutely not left-wingers. And they'll just say things that aren't true because, again, people who are trying to convince you of something don't really have to tell the truth, and they know that. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that.